In the misty mountains of medieval Japan, a peasant boy watches armored warriors thunder past, their blades flashing like fire in the dawn. He dreams of joining their ranks, of wielding the katana, of wearing the daishō, the paired swords that became the badge of samurai rank in the Edo age. But unseen walls stood between him and that dream. These were not simple traditions. They were carefully crafted rules designed to guard privilege and preserve power. Today, we uncover the hidden barriers that decided who could and who could not become samurai. The blood barrier, hereditary restrictions. The first and most unforgiving rule was written in blood itself. In the early Heian period, from 794 to 1185, warriors had not yet hardened into a caste. Bands of armed men defended aristocratic estates, fighting rival clans, collecting taxes, and keeping order. For some, valor on the battlefield could bring advancement. An ambitious man might climb if he pledged loyalty to the right patron. By the late 12th century, however, the idea of bloodline began to dominate. When Minamoto no Yoritomo established the Kamakura shogunate in 1192, he did so not simply by force, but by claiming the legitimacy of his Minamoto ancestry. The concept of the ai, or house, became essential. Family name and lineage were more important than individual merit. A warrior's ancestors stood behind him like invisible armor, conferring status and honor. Centuries later, Toyotomi Hideyoshi's reforms closed what openings remained. His sword hunt of 1588 disarmed farmers, symbolically dividing warrior from peasant. His separation edict of 1591 locked peasants into fields, merchants into markets, and warriors into service, setting a rigid hierarchy that the Tokugawa would later refine into the Shi-no-Kosho order. By the 17th century, this hierarchy was law and custom, upheld by domain registers and temple parishioner records. A farmer's son, no matter how skilled, faced an immovable wall. Even during the chaos of the Sengoku age, when Hideyoshi himself rose from peasant stock, such figures became legends precisely because they were so rare. The blood barrier had hardened. Privilege was inherited, not earned, passed down like a treasured sword from father to son. The economic gateway, wealth and resources. Beyond bloodlines lay another barrier, wealth. To be samurai was not only to bear arms, but to sustain the costs of warrior life. A suit of armor could equal a farmer's yearly harvest. A fine katana required weeks of work by smiths, polishers, and scabbard makers, each a specialist in his craft. The upkeep of a warhorse demanded stables, fodder, and trained grooms. For most villagers, such expenses were unimaginable. During the Sengoku period, daimyo rewarded loyalty with land measured in koku, the amount of rice needed to feed one person for a year. A 10,000 koku fief marked a minor lord, while a few dozen koku might support a single retainer. Rice was more than food. It was currency, tax, and a symbol of rank. After Tokugawa peace in 1603, land ownership narrowed further. Daimyo held domains, while most samurai lived on stipends of rice, converted into cash through rice brokers in the castle towns. These stipends defined not just income, but dignity. Some upper retainers lived in comfort, with tiled houses and servants. But countless low-stipend samurai struggled, selling heirloom swords, pawning armor, or writing poetry for coin to survive. Samurai were legally forbidden to farm or engage in trade, a rule meant to preserve their warrior identity. Yet necessity forced many to bend it. Some moonlighted as teachers or tutors. Others secretly brokered rice, or took work as bodyguards for merchants. In domains like Satsuma, Goshi or country samurai remained tied to land, but they were exceptions, not the norm. The economic gateway ensured that warrior status was as much about rice and resources as it was about lineage. Without wealth, even hereditary samurai could slip into quiet desperation, their swords symbols of pride but also shackles of poverty. Political allegiance, the loyalty test. Samurai status was never only about birth or income, it was also about allegiance. Japan's feudal system was a web of obligations, bound by giri, duty, and debts of gratitude. A warrior's fate depended on finding a lord willing to sponsor him with protection, stipend, and recognition. Without such a patron, even the bravest swordsman risked drifting into exile as a masterless ronin. The Sengoku age offered fleeting cracks in the wall. Ashigaru, foot soldiers drawn from peasant ranks, sometimes rose if they caught the eye of a daimyo. A skilled spearman might be adopted into a warrior house, or a brilliant strategist rewarded with land. But such promotions came with danger. Loyalty had to be proved again and again, often in near-suicidal missions to demonstrate devotion. When Tokugawa stability arrived, these cracks slammed shut. The Buke Shohato, or laws for the military houses, codified rules for daimyo and their retainers, reinforcing hierarchy. Though not an explicit entry law, the broader Tokugawa regime ensured that samurai ranks became a closed circle. Failure of loyalty was ruinous. A lord's defeat meant disgrace and often extinction for his house. Retainers who lost their masters drifted as ronin, often despised as drifters and threats to order. The most famous example came in the Akko incident of 1703, the story of the 47 ronin who avenged their lord and then committed seppuku. Their tale showed both the sanctity of loyalty and the peril of its loss. In a society where allegiance was currency, a single misstep, choosing the wrong lord, backing the wrong cause, could bankrupt a family's honor for generations. Loyalty was the lifeblood of samurai identity, and betrayal, whether by choice or misfortune, was fatal. Cultural mastery beyond the sword. By the Edo period, the sword alone was not enough. To be samurai meant to embody bunbu ryodo, the dual way of pen and sword. Martial prowess was expected, but cultural refinement gave legitimacy. Education was central. Boys studied in hanko, domain schools that taught reading, arithmetic, ethics, and military drills. In Aizu, the famed Nishinkan trained children from sunrise in archery, gunnery, calligraphy, and Confucian texts. At the shogunate's Shoheiko in Edo, Neo-Confucian orthodoxy was enforced, especially after the Kansei Edict of 1790 declared Jushi's teachings official. Samurai were expected to compose poetry in Chinese or Japanese styles, to practice brush calligraphy with elegance, and to perfect their manners for court audiences. They studied the ritual of tea ceremony, cultivated appreciation for no and kabuki theater, and engaged in music and painting. These pursuits were not luxuries. They were part of the discipline that distinguished true samurai from common soldiers. Religion deepened this refinement. Zen Buddhism taught presence and calm in the face of death. Confucian ethics emphasized duty, hierarchy, and harmony. Shinto rituals tied warriors to shrines and festivals, linking local communities to the broader order. Together, these traditions forged a moral armor around the warrior class. This cultural mastery created a divide. A farmer conscript might wield a spear with courage, but without the polish of scholarship and ritual, he could never be acknowledged as samurai. The sword gave the warrior strength, but the pen, the brush, and the tea bowl gave him legitimacy, elevating him as guardian not only of the battlefield, but of Japan's cultural soul. The Meiji transformation. When the rules broke, the arrival of Commodore Perry's black ships in 1853 shattered illusions of permanence. Japan could no longer remain sealed. The Meiji Restoration of 1868 swept away the shogunate, and in 1871 the government abolished domains, replacing them with prefectures. The hereditary privileges of the samurai began to collapse. In 1873, the conscription ordinance demanded service from all young men, noble and common alike. The monopoly on warrior status disappeared. Rifles replaced swords in the new national army. In 1876, the Haitore Edict banned public sword-wearing with exceptions for military, police, and ceremonial roles, stripping away the daishō as the visible badge of caste. That same year, the Chitsuroku Shogun commuted stipends into government bonds, many of which lost value, driving families into poverty. The consequences were explosive. Former samurai staged riots and petitions, protesting their loss of income and privilege. The most famous eruption came in the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, when Saigo Takamori, once a loyal samurai and statesman, led disaffected warriors in a doomed stand against the modern conscript army. The battlefields of Kyushu echoed with musket fire and cannon blasts, proof that the age of sword and bow was over. Yet the traditions of the samurai did not vanish. Many became teachers, journalists, and bureaucrats, their literacy and discipline serving Japan's modernization. Others staffed the new military, infusing it with a legacy of loyalty and sacrifice. The samurai as a caste disappeared, but their spirit reshaped itself, echoing through Japan's industrial rise and national identity. The rules had broken, but their legacy endured. Dying as a samurai. Seppuku, death and legacy. For the samurai, death was not simply the end of life. It was the ultimate test of loyalty and honor. To die well could redeem a family name, while to die poorly could condemn a house to shame. The most iconic form was seppuku, ritual self-disembowelment. At first, a battlefield act to avoid capture, it evolved into a formalized ritual. A condemned warrior would compose a final death poem, bathe, and dress in white robes. Before witnesses, he would cut open his abdomen with a short blade, and a second, the kaishakunin, would end his suffering with a swift stroke of the sword. Though gruesome, seppuku was seen as proof of courage and fidelity, a way to meet death on one's own terms, rather than in disgrace. Not all samurai deaths came by ritual. On the battlefield, warriors often prepared in advance, cutting their top knots, reciting Buddhist prayers, or carrying charms from shrines. To fall in combat was expected, but to face it calmly was the true measure of the warrior spirit. Some clans even encouraged sons to write jisei, short death poems, as early as adolescence, reminders that a samurai must always be ready for the inevitable call. Executions also reflected social hierarchy. A disgraced samurai might be granted the honor of seppuku, while common criminals faced hanging or beheading. Death itself became a mirror of class, reinforcing the barriers that had defined life. Legacy mattered as much as the act itself. A samurai who died bravely could elevate his descendants, ensuring their place in the hierarchy for generations. But one who faltered, refusing seppuku, showing fear, or betraying his lord, could erase centuries of family honor in an instant. For the samurai then, dying was not simply an ending. It was the final battlefield where a warrior proved who he truly was. The secret rules that decided who could become samurai reveal more than customs. They expose the hidden machinery of power. Blood, wealth, allegiance, culture, and even the manner of death combined to forge one of history's most exclusive castes. For 7 centuries, these rules elevated some to legendary status while locking out millions of others. Their collapse in the Meiji era shows how even the strongest walls can crumble under the weight of change. Yet the ideals of Bunbu Ryodo, the balance of pen and sword, of loyalty and service, still echo in Japan today. If you enjoyed this journey into samurai history, make sure to subscribe to Japan Rewind. Leave a comment with the rule you think you'd fail, and why. And don't forget to like and share this video so more people can uncover the hidden stories of Japan's past